There has never been a more important time to move in a vegan direction. Whether you're ready to start, restart, or re-energize your vegan or plant-based practice, this podcast is for you. I'm Michelle Olander, life coach, vegan, ADHD matriarch, travel lover, and smoothie loather. And I know that it's the details that get in the way of your vegan journey. But I like to believe that the obstacle is always the way. So every week we meet here where I translate the tools of life coaching and Stoic philosophy. I bring you actionable tips, some laughs, interesting guests, and vegan ideas for everyone at any age. All to help you veg your best. Episode 237, Plant-Based Persuasion or Vegan Conflict Avoidance. Welcome back to Veg Your Best, my Veg Your Besties, all my new listeners. Thank you when you show up or when you share this podcast with others. It's such a great compliment, such a great gift, and I really, really appreciate it. Today's topic is going to be a little bit more long and rambling. I'm working on something with a couple of other people, but today we're going to be talking about vegan conflict avoidance. And maybe I'll change the title of it at some point, but by nature, I am conflict avoidant. I'm often asked by my clients and by friends and by, other fellow vegans how to argue or debate or defend my vegan practices. And I am in the middle of writing something about it and working on it. But this week, I thought I'd share with you some of my thoughts on this topic because it's a subject I know many new vegans can really dread. The idea that people will make comments, that people will argue with them, that people will pick holes in their ideas. And what if they do a lousy job defending their choices, they wonder, and I get it. As I say, I am conflict avoidant, and that's not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, but it's something I notice as a default in my system because day to day, I'm pretty busy trying to challenge myself to live the life I can to the best of my abilities. I'm not super likely to give other people a hard time. And when I see behaviors in others that really bother me, and yes, this last 6 weeks or so of maybe 2 months, maybe 10 years, I don't know. But these last months in the United States have been very challenging. I have seen a lot of things that I don't like in other people. But I do, as a rule, challenge myself to concentrate on where it is that I can be rethinking my actions, taking more action, taking different action. So conflict avoidant, for sure. And I do very much try to live by the law I remember reading in Stephen Covey's famous book, 7 Laws of Highly Effective People. I read that a million years ago. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. Learning that and reorienting myself around that for years and years, honestly, that's diffused so many potential arguments in a million areas, not in veganism alone, in many, many areas for decades. So conflict management in my life can also look like avoiding, to the best of my ability, people who just like to argue. And if you like YouTube, I refer you to the Monty Python sketch from the 1970s about the argument room. And you can find that on YouTube, maybe on some other platforms. But arguments are not my favorite way to spend time. And so that might be my very first point that I'm belaboring, getting to. You can choose. You are within your rights to choose not to engage with people who are not there to learn about your thoughts or not really interested in your thoughts and are only there to try and catch you in some sort of error or contradiction. But also just because you're pretty sure you can win an argument, or you can win an argument, air quotes over the win, just because you think you can factually or logically win that argument, you may not be winning it if you pursue it. Whether that argument is about veganism, or as a mother-in-law, or as a neighbor, or as a colleague, it doesn't mean that you should win every argument that you could possibly win. I think refusing to be drawn into someone's argument can be a very, very powerful way to lead and to be a model. That said, as a vegan or someone beginning a vegan or plant-based practice or challenge, you will cross paths undoubtedly with people who spread, for defensible reasons or indefensible reasons, who spread disinformation about veganism. There will be people who challenge your ethics and sometimes genuinely want to understand what you're doing and why. But many of even those people have really deeply ingrained, internalized biases about what Melanie Joy calls the ends of animal products, that animal products are natural, normal, necessary. So you don't have to attend every argument or fight that you are invited to. But today's topic is just kind of a beginner's overview of my thoughts of how to engage in productive, logical discussions about veganism without getting too frustrated or flustered. And why? Why this topic? Because debates about veganism can feel very personal on both or all sides of the aisle. And they don't have to be about who or what is good or bad. They don't have to be. They can also be about seeing the bones of the argument, understanding the structure and the validity of the logic and the argument, rather than reacting super emotionally. And also, it won't just be you that might be emotional. People who are trying to pick holes in your lifestyle can also be leading in a very emotional, very illogical way. And I highly recommend the book, The Tools of Argument. The Tools of Argument by Joel P. Trachtman. It's a great resource for gaining awareness of your reasoning, sharpening your reasoning skills, and I think it really helps the reader step back and see how arguments are constructed, what arguments are, and how we can avoid falling into just an unproductive debate. And if you've been alive in the United States recently, there's been a lot of unproductive debate. I don't think we need more unproductive debate. And certainly veganism is such a beautiful thing. Plant-based living is such a beautiful thing. Let's try to make sure that if there's a challenge, if there's an argument of some sort, if there's something to be learned or made better or made more consistent, that we do it from a loving place. So one of the things I really enjoyed about the Tools of Argument is it helps us step back a little bit and understand when we're falling into these unproductive debates. And instead of making discussions a personal attack, we can focus on principles and evidence and sound reasoning so that people can actually engage with whatever information there is. So I know this is going to be a little bit of a longer episode, I think, because I've got a lot of notes here. But the goal for today's episode is to teach you a little bit or encourage you to learn more about how to spot logical fallacies, to strengthen your arguments, and engage in conversations that actually move the needle towards understanding. I don't believe in evangelizing, being a missionary for to make somebody else be plant-based or make somebody else be vegan. It's not my gift, and it's not my concern right now. My concern is to live that way and to help anyone who also wants to live that way. And I think that's a pretty powerful stance. Maybe other people will will handle it differently. But anyway, so today's goal is to look for ways to make your conversations more productive and more, I would say, more respectful and loving. Now, if you've ever spent any time as a vegan or around vegans, if you've spent any time as a human being lately in the United States and maybe abroad, you know the kind of debates and arguments and what my father would call urinating contests that can start almost out of nowhere in our very emotionally fraught, highly charged, yeah, I'm going to say it, manipulated, polarizing rhetoric environment we've all started to call content, online content. Your normal, everyday, average vegan or a brand new vegan can find himself in an online debate without even trying about plant-based nutrition. It can start as simply as just posting your vegan burger on Instagram or Facebook. And for some reason, it can bring all the challengers out of the woodworks. And comments and hashtags, lions eat meat, humans are just animals. And these debates will just spiral into frustration. Ask me how I know. Into frustration at best. And at worst, well, we've all seen how these things can end up online. So the number one thing I want to mention is that I think if you find yourself in one of these scenarios, honestly, don't worry too much about the person who seems to be picking the fight with you. Because the bigger picture, the real impact you have won't be with the person who's arguing. It might not even be a real person out there. But there will be probably silent observers who see you and the way you behave. Almost every time there's been a troll or a hater that's really, the nice word is interacted with me online, people I don't even know have ended up reaching out to me out of curiosity, out of genuine curiosity about why I make certain choices or why I said certain things. And that is who you might have some purchase with. That is who you might have some ability to influence a little, to kind of give them a little thought that maybe there's something they can do along the plant-based vegan continuum that might be positive for them and, of course, for the rest of our universe here. So you don't have to win a debate. And win is, I don't even know if we ever really win, if other people are triggered and hurt. And certainly I don't like somebody coming at me as if they're going to win me, So sometimes just being calm and logical and comfortable with yourself is really enough to plant the seed for people to have more curiosity about this lifestyle. And once in a while, for the person who may be picking the fight, once in a while, to see, well, there are some holes in her argument. So for me, winning is not you're wrong, and my superior logic has left you shattered and vanquished. Winning is maybe that some others see a part of your point, and maybe some see a place in this tent for themselves. Now, one of the things that brought this topic up is a recent criminal case, you may have heard, where some people in a sort of anarchic gang, I don't even know how to explain them, has been in the news, and maybe you've heard of them. They're called, supposedly, according to the news, they're called Zizians, and they've been implicated in a number of murders, and according to the news, some of them are vegan, and some of them are requesting to be fed vegan meals in prison. And it doesn't seem to matter that the overwhelming majority of the murderers, violent criminals, authoritarian regimes in this world are people who eat animal products. If you are minding your business on your vegan journey, sooner or later you will be asked to explain, you'll be asked to explain Adolf Hitler's vegetarianism or some insane group like the Zizians. And most of the time the answer, in my point of view, is like, dude, what? You don't even have to be super great at math to do those statistics. But I think what's good about the book I mentioned earlier, The Tools of Argument by Joel Trachtman, is it can help you spot as well as counter some of the most common logical fallacies. Because if you can see the holes in the logic ahead of time, you can save yourself a lot of aggravation and energy trying to refute the specifics of an argument that just isn't really an argument. And bonus points if we can train our own brains to think more critically about our own thoughts and ideas and beliefs. So thanks to Joel Trachtenberg, The Tools of Argument, I'm going to do a quick run through of how to spot a logical fallacy. And there are, I think he calls 8 of them, the most common logical fallacies. And they are, many of you may remember these from a logic class or a debating class in college. Ad hominem, meaning against the man. That's the attacking the person instead of their argument. Saying you're just a preachy vegan. Straw man, misrepresenting an argument to make it easier to attack. Slippery slope, claiming one action will lead to extreme consequences without any evidence. Bandwagon fallacy, assuming that something's right just because it's popular. Appeal to authority or social proof, using an unqualified expert as proof, or the fact that many other people do something as proof that it's correct. False dichotomy, this is a special one in my family, in my house, presenting only 2 options when most of the time many more exist. And this is the one my husband just naturally uses at home all the time. And it's a joke now. He can make a false dichotomy of anything. Red herring, that's distracting from the main issue with something emotional. And false cause, assuming correlation equals causation. So, ad hominem, attacking the person instead of their argument. And that would be like, oh my gosh, he's just a preachy vegan. Instead, you might just say, well, what about his choices bother you? Straw man, that's misrepresenting an argument to make it easier to attack. Something like, well, vegans want to ban all farmers and farms. And you might just try to bring it back to, well, maybe veganism is about reducing harm, not shutting down the means of all food production. Slippery slope, that's claiming that one action is going to lead to extreme consequences without any evidence given. So if everyone goes vegan, all farm animals will go extinct. And the argument might be, well, animal agriculture only exists because we breed animals for consumption. If the demand decreases, breeding will decrease. There may be much more to say about it, but just claiming that one action will lead to this extreme consequence is an example of a logical fallacy. Bandwagon fallacy, I think most of us can figure that one out, getting on the bandwagon, assuming something's right just because it's popular. Well, everyone I know eats meat, so it must be fine. And, the obvious counter would be, well, history has shown us many popular practices, including smoking and slavery and beating kids, that weren't always ethical or beneficial and that we don't want to continue with. Appeal to authority, that's using an unqualified expert as proof. For example, my kid's coach says he needs to eat meat for muscle, or Joe Rogan said something about eating a mostly protein-based diet. We can also just say, oh, that's very interesting, but let's look at what some of the registered dietitians and sports nutrition experts say also. False dichotomy, presenting only 2 options when there are many more. Either we eat meat or we're going to have food shortages. People will starve. And so one of the arguments to that is that we already do grow plenty of food to feed everyone. It's just that most of it is grown to feed animals instead of people, and it's very inefficiently allocated. That's one of the arguments. red herring, logical fallacy, that's distracting from the main issue by, what's wrong with you caring about animals when there are starving people and children who don't have homes? That one has come up many times. And honestly, if I'm honest with you, as a younger woman, some of that argument resonated a little bit with me. I was like, yeah, of course it would be great not to eat animals, but is that really a priority in this world? And it was a red herring, because it doesn't have to be a priority for everyone everywhere. It could just be an easy thing I do to lessen my footprint, my carbon footprint, and lessen my engagement in cruelty. So these are all interesting ideas. Oh, there's one more, I think, false cause. That's assuming that correlation equals causation. For example, I knew a vegan who got sick, so veganism must be unhealthy. When I was a young woman, long before I went vegan, Linda McCartney, who was quite famous for her efforts to encourage vegetarianism and actually began a vegetarian foods company, she died quite young, in her mid-50s. And I remember hearing all sorts of comments blaming her illness on her vegetarianism. So, and honestly, I feel it myself every time if I get a flu or a cold or anything's wrong with me, I am sensitive that people will use that as an example of why veganism doesn't work, instead of looking at all the many people who eat tons and tons of animal products, and even who seem to have very strong ideas about what's healthy in terms of animal products, often have all the same issues that the rest of us have. So anyway, we want to encourage each other to practice spotting these sorts of fallacies in our daily conversations, and certainly in our social media debates. One of the simplest ways to dismantle a fallacy is to just provide a counterexample. So if people are saying, well, lions eat meat and that's just the cycle of life, it's like, well, do we live like lions in any of their other behaviors? It's sort of cherry picking. So we want to just always be thinking, even with arguments that we resonate with, we go, that's kind of interesting. Yeah, what about that? We want to be looking for where these arguments actually make a lot of sense and where they don't. So I was thinking I would just end the podcast basically with people looking for these logical fallacies, but I thought maybe it's important for me to just kind of scribble out what my typical ethical arguments are from my point of view, or if I'm asked to defend my choices. And as I said at the beginning, first of all, I don't really care to have to defend my choices. In general, I do me, and I will answer specific questions, but I don't want to get in a amorphous debate or conversation with people who aren't really thinking about it in terms of specifics. So I love being a vegan coach, because the people who talk to me, the people who ask me, they ask me typically specific questions or bring up specific areas that are challenging for them, or specific relationships or situations that are challenging. And those are interesting. Those are fun, because we can learn so much about ourselves. We can learn so much about other people. We can learn so much about what it is we're trying to accomplish when we limit or eliminate the consumption of animal products. So for me, there's the ethical argument. And that's the principle of doing as little harm as seems possible. And in different situations, certain things seem more possible than others. And when it becomes a practice, when you're looking for ways to do less harm, you notice new solutions and new ideas. So I always feel if I can live a healthy life without causing unnecessary harm, I should just do so. And I require that of me. That is not my job to require of other people. And I do believe animal agriculture, if you look into it at all, that it causes intense suffering to other animals and to the people who are, many of whom are employed to run these factory farms. And since I believe that plant-based diets can be very nutritional and help me thrive. I just think that consuming animal products is unnecessary harm that I'm committing. Now, I know people have argued that plants feel pain and that agriculture still harms animals. And there is no way, as we always talk about on Veg Your Best, there's no way to be a perfect vegan or to live without harming anything. But growing plants for direct human consumption certainly requires far fewer resources and causes far less harm than growing plants to feed animals for later slaughter. Now, the environmental argument for me is, so far in terms of the information I've been exposed to, really pretty huge. The most sustainable food systems use less land, water, and energy and produce the most food. So animal agriculture is the leading cause of deforestation. It is a leading cause of greenhouse gas emissions and water pollution and many other issues. And the United Nations and many leading climate scientists have testified that reducing meat consumption is one of the best ways to combat climate change and land degradation. And then there's the health argument, where I think it's been fairly clearly shown by medical professionals and basic scientists that whole food plant-based diets reduce the risk of most of the things that kill most of us, like heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and many cancers. And there is the claim sometimes that vegans need supplements. Many, if not most, omnivores also require supplementation of things like vitamin D and omega-3s and fortified foods. So the claim that B12, which the reason we have problems getting B12 is because of our food system, not because vegans are particularly unable to get it. Most of the animal products that people eat, those animals have been supplemented with B12. So anyway, there's also the economic argument that feeding more people is more possible if we feed them closer to the ground, So the one that feeds the most people, the majority of crops are fed to livestock, not people. So if we redirected those resources to direct human consumption, we would dramatically reduce world hunger in many areas. Obviously, not all farmland is suitable for crops, but the majority of animal agriculture exists on land that could be either rewilded or used for sustainable agriculture. So keeping our brains open and our eyes open for logical fallacies in how we are living our day-to-day lives, the arguments that we run into, the different opinions that we hear from different people. Having this awareness is the first step to changing our minds to go in the direction that we really want, and also being a model for others and changing their minds if they are interested in it. And we can apply these insights to have such better, more productive, more peaceful conversations about veganism. So this week, your homework, if you choose to accept it, is to try spotting logical fallacies in your next discussion about veganism or anything else. But, we talk about veganism here. Try spotting the logical fallacies in your next conversation that you have on how you eat, the clothing you buy, your choices in terms of composting or avoiding certain materials. Think about it. Think about what seems right or wrong to you. What are you basing that on? Try spotting logical fallacies in your life and in the conversations that you're having with other people. And I would love you to share those experiences with me on Instagram, or you could email me. We have so much that I think we could learn together about what helps people lean in, what arguments are keeping people from trying a little bit more to move in a plant-based or vegan direction, and what arguments really do zap people, which ones really get to people. I know so many people on this podcast and people I've spoken with, the documentaries have been very, very powerful. There is something about the visual and the storytelling in many of the documentaries, like Game Changers, What the Health, Earthlings, that have created vegans almost overnight. So, but it's important to see what is the argument that works, what are the arguments that don't work, what are the arguments that I cling to that keep me from taking the next step. Those are all super interesting. So I'd like you to check out the book, The Tools of Argument by Joel Trachtman, and you will, you can use that as a textbook for yourself to develop this. I think you'll find it very, very helpful. And remember, the goal is not to argue more. Really, it's not. It's to argue a little better when you need to, and to interrogate your own thoughts to be more logical and thoughtful, because that's what creates real change. So go out there, see where your logic needs some work, see where your logic has evolved, and that's how you're going to go this week and veg your best.
Veg Your Best podcast production, music, and editing by Charlie Weinshank. Thanks, Charlie. Before you go, it would mean so much to me and the Veg Your Best team if you would hit subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, or share with someone you think might be interested. Something about algorithms, it helps bump us up a little in the rankings, and that's the best way to help others find the podcast and for us to find our audience. So, until next week, make it easy and veg your best.